The outbreak of World War II in 1939 marked the beginning of the most devastating armed conflict in history. However, for many nations, the real conflict began at different times. In previous installments of our channel, we reviewed the first 24 hours of Germany, the Soviet Union, and the United States. But now we explore how France, England, and Japan experienced their first day of combat, facing crucial decisions that would define their destiny. From the fall of France in 1940 and the desperate struggle of its troops, to the brave British resistance in the Battle of Britain, and the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Each nation experienced the start of the war differently, but with one common outcome: an unprecedented global conflict. In this military history video, join us as we explore the key moments that shaped the destiny of these powers and defined the course of World War II. France.
Parte de las fuerzas francesas luchaban con valentía, pero estaban muy mal equipadas. Muchos enclaves armados tenían solamente 40 o 50 proyectiles, no podían hacer mucho. Pero el mayor fallo de la defensa francesa fue la falta casi absoluta de coordinación y el casi inexistente sistema de comunicaciones.
When the rise of the Third Reich began, France's horizon was tinged with a false sense of security. On paper, its army remained one of the most powerful in the world. But in practice, its military doctrine was stuck in the past. While Germany perfected the use of armored vehicles and rapid war strategies, French High Command was still debating the effectiveness of cavalry on the battlefield in 1935. The signs of catastrophe began long before the German invasion. In 1936, Adolf Hitler defied the Treaty of Versailles by reoccupying the Rhineland without resistance. 2 years later, with the annexation of Austria, the Führer once again violated international agreements. The final humiliation for France and the United Kingdom was the Munich Pact, signed in 1938, which allowed the partition of Czechoslovakia in exchange for an illusory peace. But things took a truly dark turn on September 1st, 1939, as the Germans adopted a new combat tactic: lightning warfare, or blitzkrieg, which was as novel as it was lethal. Instead of attacking their enemies with the usual slow and deliberate war strategies, the Reich's High Command had trained soldiers to launch short, brutal surprise attacks when their targets were least expecting them. Driven by the recent German-Soviet non-aggression pact, the Germans decided to annex a territory that would turn all of Europe against them. It was a calculated risk, but they thought no one could stand against them. And for a while, they were right. On that September 1st, the German blitzkrieg swept through Poland with astonishing speed. France and the United Kingdom, bound by their commitments to Warsaw, declared war on Germany 2 days later. However, during the following months, the Western Front remained unusually quiet. France and Great Britain made only timid incursions into German territory without launching any real offensive that would challenge Hitler. It was a phase that historians, years later, would call the phony war. This passivity proved to be a fatal mistake. On May 10, 1940, the Wehrmacht launched its offensive against France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. While the French relied on the impregnability of the Maginot Line, the Germans bypassed that fortified wall through the Ardennes, a wooded area that French generals considered impassable for large German armored units. Within weeks, the Nazi war machine was able to dismantle the French defenses with unprecedented speed.
La moral de los franceses empezó a flaquear ante un ataque incesante contra el que parecía que no había defensa posible. Al acabar el día, Sedan, a 16 kilómetros de la frontera francesa, era un montón de ruinas. El ataque fue tan intenso que las tropas de la línea de frente no consiguieron retirarse y las unidades de reserva fueron incapaces de avanzar para ayudar a la abrumada defensa. El mando francés estaba paralizado.
The French weapons were vastly inferior in quantity and quality, but their internal logistics did little to reverse this situation. Confident that the Germans would not be able to invade, they had barely prepared, despite having been officially at war for a year. French troops kept losing soldiers, and their morale was at rock bottom, along with the blood of the fallen. On June 3rd, the Luftwaffe bombed Paris. Just 11 days later, on June 14th, German troops entered the capital at a marching pace along the Champs-Élysées. Tens of thousands of Parisians fled along the roads in a desperate exodus, leaving behind a deserted and anguished city. Faced with the bleak outlook, the French government, unable to coordinate an effective defense, fled to Bordeaux. On June 16th, Prime Minister Paul Reynaud resigned, leaving power in the hands of Marshal Henri Pétain, a hero of Verdun in World War I. This leader, revered by the French bourgeoisie and aristocracy for his role in suppressing the 1917 riots, was quick to push through a surrender agreement with Germany. This wasn't what the people wanted, but the French troops no longer wanted to continue fighting, horrified by the horrors they had experienced.
Los oficiales abandonaban a sus hombres en el campo de batalla o insistían en que habían recibido órdenes de retirarse. Las tropas en retirada advertían a las unidades de reserva que se dirigían hacia el frente. Los alemanes están allí, no vayáis.
On June 22nd, 1940, France sealed its fate. It signed the armistice in a train car in Compiègne, a scene steeped in symbolism. It was the same place where, in 1918, the Germans had been forced to sign their surrender to the Allies. The agreement stipulated that northern and western France would remain under German occupation, while the south would be governed by the Vichy regime, a puppet government headed by Pétain. Furthermore, Alsace and Lorraine were annexed by Germany, reviving the situation of 1871 after France's defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. Pétain's capitulation was not accepted by all. While the French bourgeoisie opted for submission rather than allow a popular uprising, Charles de Gaulle, then Secretary of the Council of National Defense, went into exile in London and founded the Free France movement. From the BBC, he launched his famous call to resistance on June 18, 1940, calling on the French to continue the fight against Nazism. The French resistance would indeed arm and fight, but there was still a long way to go. With the surrender of France, Hitler had achieved in a few weeks what Germany had failed to achieve in 4 years of World War I. The fall of Paris marked a turning point in the war, consolidating German dominance in Western Europe and paving the way for the next great battle, the fight for control of Great Britain. England. By May 1940, Europe was almost completely under the Nazi yoke. France had fallen, the Soviet Union maintained a non-aggression pact with Germany, and the United States, still mired in its policy of isolationism, was reluctant to intervene. Adolf Hitler's next target was clear: the United Kingdom, and things were finally starting to stir there after a year of false peace. The beginning wasn't all bad. Before facing Nazi fire directly, England orchestrated Operation Dynamo. On May 4th, 1940, the massive evacuation of British and French troops at Dunkirk was successful, a logistical miracle that saved more than 338,000 soldiers from imminent annihilation. What could have been a total disaster ended up becoming a symbol of resistance. That same day, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill addressed the nation in a speech broadcast on the BBC, intended to bolster the morale of the British people in the face of the threat of a German invasion. He truly had faith in his troops and could not conceive of being defeated by Adolf Hitler. With unwavering determination, he uttered one of his most legendary quotes.
"We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender!
Unlike France, England was already warned about the true power of the Third Reich. They had no doubt that Hitler's power was brutal, nor that they would soon be coming for them. They were not wrong. Barely a month later, on July 10, 1940, the Battle of Britain began, a brutal air campaign that would last until October 31st of that year. That day, the Luftwaffe launched massive attacks against British ports, airfields, and cities with a clear objective: to destroy the Royal Air Force and guarantee the superiority necessary for Operation ClLLED, the planned invasion of the island. This was a fight between giants. But who had the advantage? The British Navy, vastly superior to the German one, awaited the enemy's arrival in the English Channel. They were confident they could hold them off. But this was not the only factor to consider in this battle.
Pero hay un ámbito en el que la superioridad alemana es en apariencia muy superior. La Luftwaffe supera ampliamente a la Fuerza Aérea Británica. El comandante de la Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, no duda que podrá mantener el control aéreo sobre el canal el tiempo suficiente para que la operación León Marino se lleve a cabo.
The Luftwaffe assembled one of the largest air forces in history. 800 Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters, 300 Messerschmitt Bf-110 long-range fighters, 400 Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, and 1,500 Junkers, Dornier, and Heinkel heavy bombers. These were later joined by squadrons of the Italian Air Corps, dispatched in September 1940 by Benito Mussolini. For its part, the Royal Air Force had barely 700 operational fighters, having lost 430 aircraft in the French campaign. However, their resistance was not based solely on numbers, but on the bravery of their pilots, among whom were 2,936 fighters, including 141 Poles, 87 Czechs, 24 Belgians, and 13 French, as well as Canadian, Australian, South African, and New Zealand volunteers. During the course of the battle, they managed to shoot down 1,733 enemy aircraft. Despite German firepower, the United Kingdom was not defenseless. The Royal Air Force, although outnumbered, possessed cutting-edge technology.
Existe una innovación crucial que puede ayudar a los ingleses. El radar. Un equipo de científicos dirigido por Robert Watson Watt comienza a desarrollar un radar apto para detectar aviones que se aproximan desde lejos. Estos radares podrán detectar aviones en un radio de 190 kilómetros y determinar su distancia, su dirección, su altura de vuelo y su número. La información será remitida al cuartel general del mando de cazas de la RAF, situado en Bentley Priory, en las afueras de Londres.
It was thanks to this that the United Kingdom resisted, but there was also a mistake by the Reich that would play entirely in its favor. The Germans made a fatal strategic blunder by shifting their attention from airfields and aircraft factories to attacks on cities like London, Coventry, and Birmingham, allowing the Royal Air Force to recover and reorganize. On September 15, 1940, the Royal Air Force inflicted enormous losses on the Luftwaffe in a series of aerial engagements that marked a turning point. 2 days later, Hitler indefinitely canceled Operation ClLLED, recognizing that the invasion of Britain was no longer viable. However, German bombing continued, claiming the lives of more than 48,000 civilians. The United Kingdom had achieved the unthinkable, single-handedly resisting the Nazi advance and thwarting Hitler's plan to subject Western Europe to absolute rule. The Battle of Britain was not only a tactical victory, but also a symbol of determination that would inspire the Allies for years to come. Japan, the war was in full swing, but two powers crucial to the development of the conflict as we know it still had to join in. Two great armies that seemed to have no particular interest in World War II and instead pursued their own objectives until the situation escalated to unthinkable levels of violence. Since 1937, Japan had waged a brutal war against China, facing fierce resistance supported by the United States. However, tensions between the two nations escalated further when Washington imposed an economic embargo in 1941, cutting off supplies of oil and other vital resources for the Japanese war machine. Japan, determined to consolidate its dominance over Southeast Asia, knew that the only way to achieve this without American intervention was to neutralize the Pacific Fleet in a devastating blow. Until then, Japanese strategy envisioned an armed conflict with the United States in its territorial waters. However, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the Imperial Navy, understood that modern warfare would be defined by air supremacy and the use of aircraft carriers. Inspired by the successful British attack on the Italian fleet at Taranto in 1940, Yamamoto devised a new tactic: strike first and strike hard, destroying the American fleet at Pearl Harbor before it could sail. The key was to buy time, and therefore the offensive had to be brutal.
Durante su estancia en Estados Unidos, había desarrollado un gran respeto por el país que ahora era el enemigo de Japón, porque había visto con sus propios ojos la inmensa capacidad industrial de Estados Unidos. Quizá fuera eso lo que movió al pragmático Yamamoto a advertir a sus compatriotas al inicio de la guerra: podemos hacer lo que queramos durante 6 meses o un año, pero después de eso no tengo absolutamente ninguna confianza.
The Japanese government attempted to send a formal declaration of war just hours before carrying out their attack. They did not want to flout the Hague Conventions. However, this was not possible. The telegram encountered problems during its journey and arrived in Washington after all the damage had been done. The United States truly had no idea what awaited them when the planes began to approach. However, there were pre-attack signals that went unheeded by the American military. On December 6th, American cryptologists intercepted and deciphered a Japanese message about ship movements at Pearl Harbor, but officers did not consider it urgent. On the same day of the attack, a radar operator on Oahu detected a large formation of approaching aircraft, but his superiors mistook it for a group of American B-17 en route. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a lightning offensive, sending 353 planes organized in 2 waves to annihilate the Pacific Fleet. The attack force was assembled from an imposing fleet: 6 aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, 2 battleships, 2 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers, as well as 35 submarines, including midget submarines that attempted to infiltrate the harbor.
Los japoneses planeaban atacar en 2 oleadas sucesivas. Fushida dirigió personalmente la primera oleada de 183 aviones y su formación abandonó los portaaviones a las 6 de la mañana del 7 de diciembre.
From north of Hawaii, Japanese planes descended on Pearl Harbor at 7:55 a.m. Barely an hour later, at 8:50 a.m., a second, similar wave intensified the attack. The bombing was devastating. 19 American warships were sunk or severely damaged, including 8 battleships. 169 aircraft were destroyed on land, and the bombs claimed 2,403 lives, including 68 civilians. The toll could have been even worse if the 3 American aircraft carriers had not sailed days earlier for maneuvers, thus avoiding their destruction. However, most of the American Navy fleet was destroyed.
El buque de guerra Arizona salió peor parado, ya que los torpedos y las bombas que lo alcanzaron convirtieron el barco en un auténtico infierno en llamas, que rápidamente se hundió en las aguas del puerto, pereciendo más de 1000 miembros de su tripulación atrapados bajo las cubiertas. Al Arizona se le unieron en el fondo marino el Oklahoma y el California. y únicamente una rápida labor de achicamiento de agua logró salvar al West Virginia de volcar cuando quedó parcialmente sumergido.
Japanese losses were minimal in comparison. 29 planes shot down and 129 men killed, in addition to 1 soldier captured. The attack on Pearl Harbor marked the beginning of a coordinated offensive. With the United States momentarily defeated, Admiral Yamamoto had bought himself the time he had sought. And just hours after the massacre of the Americans, Japan launched multiple simultaneous invasions. Thailand, the Philippines, Guam, and Wake Forest, U.S. territories. Malaysia and Hong Kong, British possessions. The Dutch East Indies, present-day Indonesia, and Borneo, from which it expelled the British and Dutch on December 16th. The Japanese war machine advanced unstoppably in the following months, securing strategic resources and establishing near-absolute dominance in the Pacific and Southeast Asia, while America was recovering from the devastating blow of Pearl Harbor. Taking advantage of this moment, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States, taking the conflict to its final scale. World War II had now become a truly global confrontation. These early battles didn't define the end of the conflict, but they did profoundly mark its protagonists and the course of World War II. While at the end of the day, we know that the Axis was defeated by the might of the Allies. Initially, things didn't look so bright, and Adolf Hitler really came very close to perpetuating his reign of horror forever. Knowing these early results helps us understand the broad nuances that a conflict of this magnitude can go through. That's all for today's video on military history. Leave us your answer in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with our installments. Without further ado, we bid you farewell. Until next time.